Okay. Christina, we have 30 minutes scheduled. We are actually 30 minutes behind, but we're going to let the afternoon participants know that we're running a little bit behind and, just kind of have them on standby. But we do have about 30 minutes, and I think you probably already know that we want about half time for your presentation and half time for questions. And this group so far today has had many questions about things because they really, like to get in and drill down, and it's important that we know all the details. So, and then I think you might have also had some questions provided to you ahead of time. So we're hoping that you would be able to answer those in your presentation. So,
Yes, I will.
Thanks. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity, members of the Budget Committee and commissioners, to present the Juvenile Department's budget today. I will go ahead and ask if we can, actually, I don't see it on my screen, so I'm just looking to see. Oh, there it goes. Lisa, I was just a little ahead of you there. Thanks. I just want to start out by sharing our new mission statement that we developed this year as part of our update to our Performance Clackamas Strategic Business Plan. And that mission is to provide equitable juvenile justice, family support, intervention, and reformation services to youth so they can repair harm to victims, experience positive change, and contribute to a safe, healthy, and secure community. Our department handles roughly close to 1,500 referrals to the juvenile department each year, and about 700 of those are for criminal referrals. About 400 are for runaway and other status offenses, and then approximately 350 are for violations such as minor in possession of alcohol. If you want to go ahead, Lisa, and go ahead and thank you. As you can see from the pie chart on the left, most of our revenue comes from the general fund, about 76%. Our second largest source of revenue is the green slice of pie, which represents our state funding. We get a little over 12% of our budget at this time from the state, and I'll talk a little bit more later about potential impacts with the state's situation. And then on the right, in terms of expenditures, no surprise, more than half of our expenditures are for personnel services. We're in the business of serving people and kids and parents. So obviously we need folks that can do that direct service work. And then about 34% is spent on materials and services in our budget. So Lisa, if you want to go ahead and move it. Thanks. On this slide, we're talking about specific numbers. I wanted to share that a lot of change has happened in terms of our budget during fiscal year 1920. During the actually going back to last August, we were talking about the situation that the county anticipated being in terms of the budget shortfall. And back then we were talking about an $8 million gap for the upcoming year. And I heard County Administrator Gary Schmidt this morning in his budget message talk about how he has been talking to us since he became our administrator about the one county, one team approach. And he's talked about that a lot. So last summer, after the books closed, we, Ed, Lisa, myself, and Mark, looked at where we were at, and we had quite a large fund balance. So we thought about what is the right thing to do as public servants, as leaders in the county, not just from the juvenile department vantage, also as part of this public safety grouping. You've already heard from most of my colleagues in public safety. Nancy is up after me, I believe, or a little later this afternoon. But we really tried to think about what can we do to contribute to having a more sustainable budget, not just for our department, but hopefully for the county. So that led to us making some pretty dramatic changes. I've never done anything like this in my 16 years of being a juvenile department director in 3 different counties. But what we did was during the supplemental budget process that took place in January, we went ahead and made an attempt to right-size our budget. And what I mean by that was we went ahead and cut 7 vacant positions in January, and we turned back a significant amount of carry forward balance that we had. And you can see this later in my slides. I'll probably skip over those. But that resulted in us being able to return $2,293,000 to the county's general fund in January. And we actually had more than that. We had over 3 million, but we asked that we have 1,201,000 of county general fund to help us with our operating expenses and right size our budget. And by cutting the 7 vacant FTEs, we were able to reduce our ongoing costs. For this year, it represented about $842,000 in personnel costs that, as you know, increase year over year as expenses go up. So that was the significant action that we took in January. This spring, we were asked to relook at our projected year end. We had put that in February, and then we had some changes happen. A little thing called COVID-19 really impacted us. So that actually led to us being in a situation where we couldn't fully utilize some of our contracts. So we redid our projected year end, which results in another $1,005,000 being transferred back to the general fund for the upcoming year. We decided that from here on out, we will not keep our fund balance, and our approach to doing our budget will be to live within the allocation that we get from the county general fund and the state. Okay, so if you look at, Lisa, can you go back to that last? I just wanted to point out a couple of things. If you look in the column that is labeled fiscal year 1920 amended budget at the bottom under FTE budgeted, you will see that reduction. We went to 4 FTE, and then if you look immediately to the left, you will see in the adopted budget we were originally at 54 FTE. So that's where that shows up in our budget. And then if you go to let's see, where are we here? Amended budget fiscal year 1920 under the interfund transfer area. Yes, Lisa's got her cursor on it. That represents the $3,495,000 approximately that we transferred back that I just described. And then lastly, if you go to the projected year end column for fiscal year 1920 in green, you'll see the $1,055,627 that we projected as our year end that we will be returning to the county general fund in fiscal year 2021. Okay, so Lisa, if you want to go ahead and move along to the next one, that's great. This next slide is our MFR slide, and it shows the different lines of businesses that we have in our department. We have 4. These 3 of the 4 are designed to be reflect what our statutory mandates are in the Oregon Revised Statute Juvenile Delinquency Code. They're public safety, reformation, and accountability, and our 4th line of business is administration. So I've already talked about the significant issues and relevant changes below that's in the bottom of this slide. So we can go ahead and move on to the next one, Lisa. I came to the budget committee last spring and talked about our crossover youth practice model initiative, which had just begun in January of 2019. So we've been working on this coming up on a year and a half. This has been a major system change initiative for Clackamas County. I'm really proud of the level of collaboration and the breadth and depth of partners that we've had involved in this. We've partnered very closely with Child Welfare, the Clackamas County branch of DHS, the Oregon Youth Authority, the Clackamas County DA's office, behavioral health, schools, many others. really to put a focus on developing a model that helps us to do much better work with young people that are dually involved with the child welfare and the juvenile justice system. You heard Sheriff Roberts talking about how important prevention is in with child abuse and victimization in our community. The young people that are these crossover youth are some of the most vulnerable, most trauma impacted children that we have in Clackamas County. And the research shows that kids are involved, the long-term likelihood that they're going to have poor outcomes. What I mean by that are greater levels of addiction and mental health issues, higher likelihood of graduating to the adult system, and a higher likelihood of having, when they become parents, having their own children involved in systems such as child welfare. So this work has been very important, and I tell people it's not just a flavor of the week. This isn't a diet. This is a lifestyle change. So it's really something that I think is going to help our community in terms of one of the priorities that our commissioners have set to the strategic priority to ensure safe, healthy, and secure communities. Lisa, if you want the next one. So I'm not going to read all of these, but this has been a very labor-intensive undertaking, and I'm very excited with the, at the start, the values and goals that our group identified, the focus on improving lives for youth and families, prioritizing resources that are trauma-informed. And I really apologize. I have a puppy who's being a little distracting. I'm sorry for that. That are trauma-informed and promote equity for children of color and LGBTQ+ youth in our community. One of the most major undertakings of this project is developing a collaborative protocol that everyone agrees to come to the table to serve these young people and adhere to. And that has taken, we completed that task in January of 2020. It took us about a year, and it was a very heavy lift. A lot of different partners and folks who brought their expertise to the table. And that led to, in the end of January and the end of February, doing extensive training of all of the juvenile and child welfare caseworkers in Clackamas County. So that I want to thank the Public and Government Affairs Department in Clackamas County. They videotaped all that training for us so that as new workers come on and people retire, we are able to offer them videos so that they can get up to speed on this protocol. So that was really a great service that we received from them. And as you can see, third bullet up, implemented the Clackamas County Crossover Youth Practice Model protocols effective March 1st, 2020. So that was the day we decided, okay, we're going to start taking this for a test drive and using this new way of doing business, which was followed by March 2nd of Clackamas County declaring that we were in a state of emergency due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So I did receive an advanced question about the crossover youth practice model and what percentage of the caseload of young people we serve were part of this crossover grouping. And I wanted to say, obviously it's a new model. We implemented on March 1st, but we had a very significant impact from COVID-19. Our referrals are way down, and our referrals are down because law enforcement is not sending as many young people to us right now, and that's understandable. And child welfare, it's been highly publicized, their referrals are way down in terms of reports of child abuse and neglect. So I think that is having an impact on us. But even with that impact, we had done some pre-work before we started on the crossover youth practice model to try to get a sense of how many kids that we serve fell into this population. And our pre-work suggested, by looking at historical data, that it would be approximately 15% of the youth who are involved in delinquency in our, referred to our department for delinquent behaviors. And what we're seeing so far is 9%. So we're a little under what we anticipated, which isn't really that surprising since it's such a new initiative. And then we've had this major unprecedented intervening situation happen. So we have, we are confident that as things settle down a little bit more, we will see those numbers go up, but not likely that it'll be much more than 15% of our population. But I want to also point out that this is one of the groups of young people that fall under the category of having specialized needs. They tend to be young people that have a lot of involvement with multiple systems as they're progressing through adolescence. What we can go ahead. So hopefully that answered the question that I received about the crossover youth practice model. We have had some other major accomplishments in 2019. I referenced at the beginning that we have a new mission statement, which was part of the work that we did to update our strategic business plan for Performance Clackamas. I'm really proud of the process that we used. We involved every single employee, every work team in our department, and there was quite a focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and how we can enhance our service delivery as a department. So I'm really proud of the process and the product that yielded. Our next accomplishment is this time last year, we looked at what our numbers were for the percentage of our full-time staff who were people of color. And this time last year, it was 20%. We did some hiring in the early part of this fiscal year, and we were able to increase our diversity rate to 28%. So that's a 40% jump in the last year. We put a lot of effort and intentionality into that work, and we decided to expand the number of bilingual positions that we had in our juvenile intake and assessment center to provide better service, and that's reflected in this. This time last year, I remember being in the budget meeting and having Chair Bernard ask me what how we were doing with performance evaluations for our employees, because the county had made it a goal to increase the number of employees who are getting an annual performance evaluation. And I'm very proud of our managers and our leadership team, because we really rolled up our sleeves and worked hard to make sure that we came up with a tracking system, and we were making sure that people got their annual evaluation. So we achieved the rate of 100% of our full-time employees in 2019. Next, going back to some of our stats, we are not listed at the BCC's strategic priorities because they revamped them this year and they took out some of the measures that were more directly linked after they changed their priorities or adjusted them. And what I wanted to make sure to do, though, was to highlight a couple that I thought were important for people to know. This next one is 95% of youth are crime-free a year after their probation ends. I think that's really important, because I think that says that, or I'd like to take credit for our department for it, but I think that indicates that the work that we're doing in the juvenile department is leading to success for young people if a year later they still have managed to stay out of trouble. So wanted to make sure you were aware of that. And then the next one, 100% of youth, identified youth successfully completed sex offender specific treatment. We don't have a large population of juveniles who are under the jurisdiction of the juvenile court for having committed sex crimes, but the ones that we have are with us for a long time and they need specialized services. And we are really proud that our collaboration with Parrot Creek for outpatient sex offender treatment for juveniles has year after year yielded very successful outcomes. So wanted to make sure that you were aware of that, because this is a population that the community has a lot of interest and concern in typically. And then we felt it was a major accomplishment to go through all of the analysis that we needed to do to figure out how to right size our department's budget without reducing services to youth, their families, and to the victims that we are charged to serve. So that was not a small undertaking, but we feel like we've accomplished that in our proposed budget. Lisa, if you want to go ahead and move forward. Thank you. So significant changes. I believe I've already covered this. I talked about our supplemental budget process in January. Tom, Mr. Felia, I heard you in other people's presentations talk about concerns about service levels to the people that we are entrusted to serve, which is the right thing to be focusing on, which is why I'm especially proud of the proposal that we put in. We looked at our vacancies and we really looked at data, whether or not we were at caseload levels where we could give up some vacancies, could we consolidate some functions, were there efficiencies that we could create? And that led to us being able to put through a proposal right now that doesn't have any impacts to services for any of our clients. However, we will be, as everyone else is waiting to see what's going to happen with the state, if they stick to the 8.5, which someone mentioned earlier, is really a 17% reduction for the upcoming year. We are looking at approximately $250,000 in cuts. The funding that we receive through the state goes to pay for our detention beds that we contract for at the Donald D. Long facility in Portland. And they also are used to fund our community-based diversion program throughout the county in 11 different towns and cities. So those are very important services, and the state funding will have an impact, and we'll have to make some tough decisions about how we're going to cover those services without that state funding. If you want to go ahead. Yes, thanks, Lisa. The significant changes slide here, I also wanted to make sure to let the committee know that we discontinued our juvenile drug treatment court in February. We received notice last summer that the Criminal Justice Commission was cutting our funding by 62%. And that was related to a steady decline in the youth enrollments in the drug treatment court program. We'd actually dwindled down to 8 or 9 youth graduating in all of 2019 from that program. And we could not justify continuing it under those circumstances. So one of the other barriers to the juvenile drug treatment court program was that it was a voluntary program. The youth and the youth's parents had to agree to participate in the program. And we found that we were not getting a high level of voluntary participation, which is why the enrollments declined. So the good news is we have a great partnership with the Community Health Center's Behavioral Health Division, and they are going to continue to work with us, and we are exploring the possibility of partnering with Reclaiming Futures, which is a national organization that focuses on substance abuse with adolescents, and they are part of Portland State University, and they may be able to offer us some technical assistance and consulting. We actually had a stakeholder meeting, presentation, question and answer session scheduled for the beginning of April, and unfortunately that was canceled because of COVID-19, but we are hoping to early this summer get that going again. And I think that covers all of our slides. I did receive some notice from Elizabeth that there were some questions about how many people we had hired this year. And as of July 1st, 2019, we hired 6 full-time employees. Those folks had all been approved before the July 1st, 2019 hiring freeze went into effect. The recruitments had already been started, and all of these individuals started with our department in either July or August of 2019. We haven't hired any other full-time employees since then. We have hired 4 relief and on-call employees who are considered temporary workers, and they work in our juvenile intake and assessment center, our 24-hour facility, to cover shifts when our full-time staff aren't available or when we have gaps in our scheduling. So that is where we stand on hiring. And the question, do you feel your budget is stabilized over the next few years? Well, I wish I had an answer to that. I'm feeling pretty concerned about what's going on with the state. Obviously, I'm even more concerned about what's going on with our county, which is why we decided we needed to make some shifts this year as soon as possible. So I don't really have the answer to that. I'm not feeling very confident about the way things are looking with the state. I'm also concerned because of the hydraulic effect we have. A lot of with the Oregon Youth Authority, most of our state funding is passed through to us from the Oregon Youth Authority. And some of my colleagues in other counties, when they are experiencing cuts from the Oregon Youth Authority, their reaction is to say, okay, we'll just go ahead and commit more young people to the Oregon Youth Authority and let them serve those youth. That is not the philosophy or the value that the Clackamas County Juvenile Department or the commissioners have supported in the past. The research shows that incarceration usually leads to worse outcomes, especially when you're talking about adolescents. So we have built a very good system in our county to support young people being able to remain safely in the community. And I'm very concerned with, even if it's not about our own state funding, our own county funding, what the impacts of the cuts at the state level in juvenile justice are going to have on the whole system, including the counties. So I think that, the last couple of questions, last question I had here was no vehicles but it was asking about if we had any vehicles at higher than $10,000 budgeted to be purchased in the upcoming year. We are not purchasing any new vehicles. We like to drive ours into the ground. So yeah, we do not have a line item in our budget for that. And as far as making sure to respond to the questions in advance, the only question that we specifically received was on the crossover youth practice model. So I'm hoping I've fully answered that for you now. So thank you, and I'm ready to take whatever questions that you have.
Oh, thank you, Christina. That was great. And Brenda, I think we have a couple of people in the queue for that. So go ahead.
We have Commissioner Humberston and then Mr. Feely.
A comment and a question. First, I had the opportunity over the year to meet with our LGBTQ internal group of employees with the county, as well as the advisory group for equity, diversity, and inclusion. And when I first met with those folks, what I anticipated more than anything was an interest in making sure that we hire more people of diversity in our county. And that certainly is a focus of those organizations. But what was pleasantly surprising, and what you have addressed, was that they were really interested in making sure that the services that we provide out into the community for youth were outwardly focused also on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and the special needs of LGBTQ young people. So I really appreciate the fact that you addressed that. And as I said, I was particularly appreciative of the fact that our staff weren't just looking internally at their own best interest, but also were looking outward at the community interest. On a different note, your 95% success rate for 1 year of crime-free youth is good. Is there any opportunity for you to look further out of over 2 years or 3 years and see what the numbers are? Because obviously the longer that goes, the more likely positive impacts have occurred.
Yes, we do have the ability to measure that, and we can do that in the future from our Clackamas County standpoint. That is not one of the statewide measures that the other county juvenile departments are measuring and have in the annual published reports. that go out on the OYA website. However, that's something we have the capacity to do, and that's a great suggestion. We do have, on a statewide level, it's not after probation, it's from the time that a youth is referred to the juvenile department. There is a statewide measure of whether or not they recidivate 1 year out or 3 years out. So Clackamas has historically been, we've only been doing that for about the last 5 years, and we have been one of the lowest rates, but in terms of the 3-year mark. And I apologize, I don't have it right on the tip of my tongue, but I can easily get it. So. Well,
I appreciate that. Since half of my career in criminal justice was dealing with youths, as they say, the two youths. I would be interested in that statistic further out to see how well your efforts have taken, if you will. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Feely?
Thank you. Good presentation, Christina. You're doing a lot of excellent work.
Thank you.
And your presentation was great until you told me that you drove your vehicles into the ground, because that's not necessarily
and that discussion
an effective thing to do. But
no, actually, I should
another day.
Yeah. Well, I think I was exaggerating a little bit. Okay. I have Mark McDonald on the phone who really takes care of our fleet stuff pretty well. So.
All right. Let's talk about right sizing, because I've heard that word used repeatedly, and I think most people use it in the context of aligning your current expenditures to your current revenues. I don't necessarily buy that that's right sizing, because you're not taking into account the needs of your customers, but it sounds like you have, and that you do consider the current budget to be right sized. Would that be a fair thing to say?
The current budget as we proposed it.
In the proposed budget. But any additional cuts required by state cuts would change that to less than right size, right?
Right.
Okay. And I think it's important to just a note for the budget committee that we need to talk about what right sizing means, because that term's been used repeatedly, but not necessarily in a consistent way. So, I mean, it's kind of a popular phrase, but let's define it before we continue to use it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Savis?
Yeah, I just want to comment to the question about right sizing. If you may recall, when I have brought that up today, it's about finding out where the bottlenecks are and where we need to enhance the provision of public service or public safety, not reduce. So when I use the word bottlenecks, that's what I was referring to, the enhancement.
Yeah, and I wasn't necessarily talking about you. So
yeah, and I just wanted to say that it was a conversation, and I want to thank everyone who participated in that discussion. I actually was able to convene a number of people to talk about that, and was hoping that we could continue that dialogue around right sizing our public safety system. But the times are more dire than now today than they were then. So I don't know how we do it, and I don't know what that discussion looks like today, but I think it's a discussion we need to have. And you're right, I think there's a lot of different contexts in which people might want to say that, and different motivations and different drivers for that. But in the end, I think it would be, even in a tight environment, I think it would be a financially tight environment. It would be a responsible thing to do to make sure that we do have some balance, so we're not overly investing in one area, and while we're maybe limited, whether it be investment or a size of a building or a structure, there's a number of things that contribute to the sizing. So there's buildings, there's manpower, there's the resources, and all the above. So I just want to give some context to at least my intent of that word.
Drenda, I don't see any other hands raised, any other questions from the group. Excuse me. Christina, thank you very much. Christina, do you want to say something?
I just wanted to share how I view right sizing in terms of preparing a budget. Okay. And when I arrived here in Clackamas County in the spring of 2016, I quickly learned that we had a fund we had been using, an earmark from a legislative earmark that we had received, that we were drawing down on to supplement our operations, because the way the county general fund formula for maintenance had been done had left a deficit in our operational budget. So I quickly learned that that was going to run out in 2 years. So the first thing that I did was impose an internal hiring freeze, so to speak, even though we didn't have one in the county, we had one in our department. And I said, every single time we have a vacancy, we are going to stop and we're going to analyze it. And we're going to see if we need it for that purpose, or if there's an opportunity to repurpose the position to meet a service need that's being unmet. And we've done that several times over the last 4 years and not come to the budget committee and asked for a policy level proposal to expand our department. So for me, part of what right sizing is really assessing what the needs are and trying to be creative and honest about how you can meet those needs with the resources you have. And so for us, our leadership team, going ahead and making the cuts in January was the right thing to do, because we can still meet the needs without holding on to vacancies year over year over year and building up a big fund balance that we are really depriving the citizens of our county from possibly having funding, resources and services for them funded that aren't going to be funded if I'm over at the juvenile department hoarding, so to speak. So that's my view of right sizing. So I just wanted to share that, and my team's view.
Well, I am sure that we all very, very much appreciate that. And some of your fellow department chairs out there somewhere should appreciate that too, because you probably made it a lot easier for them by the fact that you were looking at how to right size your department and what you gave back to the general fund in this past year. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Well, thanks, but I'm just one person on a team. So
I know. Yeah. And then as Gary says, it's one Clackamas County, right? You know,
yes.
yeah, it's one team and everybody helps each other. And that's a great example of it. So thank you.